Can anybody remember anything that was said last week? That's what normally happens in a class. You do a small review of last week and then you carry on with the subject this week. Can anybody remember anything?
Theoretical physics.
We strayed into theoretical physics. Yes, you get to do that sometimes. Can anybody remember anything?
You went through essentially what Vedanta means, part of the Vedas, and then we looked at the main three ways of learning and how to learn.
Right. So the Vedas are very old, at least they don't really know how old it is, but it was written down in Sanskrit when Sanskrit started to appear at about 3,500 years ago. So quite a large body of text. So the Vedas are a means of knowledge. What is it a means of knowledge for?
Self-knowledge.
Self-knowledge. And why go to the bother of getting self-knowledge? Why would anybody bother to get some self-knowledge? Is to eliminate suffering. Our fundamental problem is that we don't know who you are, so self-knowledge solves that problem. And once you have knowledge of the self, the ups and downs of life that are known as samsara can come into a different context, so that you start to become. Do come in. No, you're in the, oh right, you are in there, okay. Yeah, there's another meditation class. Good morning, Rupam, how are you? So, it's to eradicate, ultimately to eradicate suffering, because we all have experienced moments of extreme happiness, and we think that what I really want more in life is that I want this happiness to be permanent, all right? What can I do to make this happiness permanent? Vedanta is a body of knowledge, therefore it needs to be taught, and therefore one needs to learn. So the three main mechanisms of learning were what? Refer back to notes here. The first, the Vedas actually stipulate how you learn. All right, they actually, if you're going to learn something, they might as well start from the beginning. I describe the Vedas almost as a manual for human beings. You know, every product has a manual, and the manual is there for the purpose of operating the device. We're operating the device, so we need a manual, and the Vedas are effectively a manual for operating the device. So how do we learn? And the note said?
By listening intently without judgment.
Right.
Analysing fully by questioning, and then contemplation by thinking about it deeply.
Right. So why do we need to, first stage is listening without judgment. Why do we need to listen without judgment?
Otherwise you keep putting our opinions that are drawn from the past onto the present.
That's right. So when you listen with an opinion, your opinion is based on what you already know. All right. And so if you reject something that comes to you based on an opinion to say, I don't think that's true, or that's unbelievable, then what you're doing is rejecting new information based on what you know. You will never learn anything new. So the attitude should be one of intense hearing. Mostly this is taught by spoken word. Intense hearing, and to be able to take it all in, subject to future confirmation. You don't have to believe. This is not a matter of belief. You don't have. This is the so belief systems are said by people to say just believe what they're preached. Vedanta is never preached. Vedanta is knowledge, therefore it is taught. So it's not a belief system, but you need to hear what has been said. The second stage is the analysis, because having heard exactly what has been said, you now need to eliminate the doubts in what you've heard. All right. And that really comes through a series of Q&A with the teacher. To say, I heard what you said, right? I don't understand what that means. All right. And you get this Q&A, that's the analysis. And once that all the doubts have been eliminated about the knowledge, you then go into contemplation, personal contemplation with everything that you've learned, and you say to yourself, is that my truth? Because it only applies to you, right? Other people cannot make you understand something unless you decide that it is your own truth. And Vedanta is all about the personal self-knowledge, one truth.
Hi, sorry, is the heating working there?
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Please, please. Oh, there's a secret switch at the back. And then it opens again. There you go. All right. So, and we said that the other thing that we said about the Vedas is that the Vedas is an expanded piece of knowledge. Most of it is not to do with the Upanishads and the knowledge that you want to know about. Most of it is to do with rituals. Why is it to do with rituals? Because 99.99% of us are materialists. We want things. We want more money, a better car, a better spouse, no spouse, better home, whatever, all right? And if you want any of those things, there will be some ritual in the Vedas for you to go and get that. Anything that you wish for in a material world, if you feel that that is your role in life, that's how you want to progress, then it'll do that, all right? Then there's a middle section of the Vedas where for those people who find that I've got all the material things and I still haven't found happiness, when they start to question, is there something more? Then the Vedas start talking about, yes, there is something more, but in order to learn that, you've got to prepare your mind. And it teaches you various mechanisms to prepare your mind for the knowledge to follow. Part of that, for instance, is meditation. All right. And so once you've done that, the latter part of the Vedas, what are known as Veda Anta, Anta meaning the end of the Vedas, contain the wisdom teachings in the form of Upanishads. Right. So that's why we call Upanishad study of Vedanta the end of the Vedas. And there's 108 Upanishads, of which typically we study about 10 or 11, because a great monk, Adi Shankara, wrote extensively on these main Upanishads. And some of you may have studied Katha Upanishad with Swamiji. She wrote a book on it. So that might be something that we get to do in April. We'll see how the group goes. The Upanishads themselves are middle ranking in terms of difficulty. The lower ranking, the easiest to understand, is the Bhagavad Gita, which is the works of the Upanishad, the wisdom of the Upanishads, but done in a simpler form. And then above the Upanishads are the Brahma Sutras, which are a complete relative analysis of all schools of Vedanta, which is a very difficult exercise, and that is regarded as the top echelon of Vedanta teachings. Okay? Have I missed out on anything from last week? Was that about it?
I think that's it.
All right, that's how we really started. One of the things that we did say is that the entire world is really with a reference to yourself. Vedanta is about self-knowledge, knowledge of who you are, because it's regarded that since I refer to the entire world from the perspective of myself, then the first thing I need to find out is who I am. Otherwise, the knowledge of everything else will not make sense, because everything is a reference to me. All right. So Vedanta takes a very strong view in terms of trying to tell you what the basics of the Vedanta teachings are, and they are completely contrary to what one normally believes. In the state of the individual, Vedanta says you are complete. This is not like a religion that says if you follow these things, if you worship in this way, you will go to heaven. There's not a future thing. It just says you're perfect, right? You just don't know you're perfect. And I've grown up all my life knowing that I'm imperfect, and suddenly Vedanta turns around and says, you're perfect. I grow up knowing that I'm limited in knowledge, intellect, physical ability, age. I'm limited. And Vedanta says, you're unlimited. I'm brought up to think that I'm born and therefore one day I will die. Vedanta says, you're immortal. So all the things that you've spent a jolly good life building up and believing in, Vedanta completely says, that's not true. You're ignorant of who you truly are. All right. Now, therefore, this requires some careful analysis. When somebody turns around and says everything that you currently believe is actually incorrect, then you have to say, all right, well, prove it to me. All right? And Vedanta says, I will. And that's what these classes are for. Then it gets to the world. Because I believe myself to be a limited individual, I believe myself to be an object in the world of objects. And therefore, the more I think about it, the tinier I feel. All right? Here I am as an individual sitting in this room of thousands of rooms in Reading, which is in millions of rooms in the UK, and let alone the planet, the universe. The larger I think, the smaller I become, the more insignificant I become. All right? And Vedanta says that world of objects that you consider yourself to be separate from is not separate from you. All right? Could have fooled me. I brought up in my entire life to think that I'm this one particular object sitting amongst a sea of billions of objects that are out there, and we're told by the astronomers how many billions of stars there are and planets and beings on them and all of those things. So it actually says this world that you consider to be absolutely real, all right, is useful, is transactional, all right, it's just not real. It's not an illusion. It's definitely there. It's just not real. And the definition of reality in Vedanta is that which exists in the three periods of time: the past, present, and future. Effectively, eternity. The thing that exists for always is considered to be real. And anything else is considered to be a relative reality, right? Apparently real. You can say for a period of time, all right? Or in a particular location. It's real in that location, but it's not real in the definition of Vedanta. So we sit in a world of objects and they seem pretty real to me. If I fall over and knock my head, it seems pretty real that my head will hurt, all right? And Vedanta turns around and says, actually, the world is not as you see it, not as you perceive it, all right? It's not real. So that needs some explanation. And the third part is that, the third question people always ask is that, is there a God? Is there a higher form of energy? Because I'm this minuscule, tiny little thing, an object among billions of objects. Is there somebody who's pulling all the strings, controlling it all? Right? And Vedanta gives a categorical answer. It says, yes, there is. Right? And then it surprises you by saying, and that God is you. So I've brought up my entire life with these three ideas about myself, the world, and God, right? And they're ingrained into me. They've been taught to me from an early age. Vedanta comes along and says, forget all of that, all right? That's not true. Let me show you how the world acts, how it is, and what is your relationship to those things. That's what makes it so interesting, right? And it's incredibly logical. And because the subject matter is you, it is self-knowledge, you are in the best authority to figure out whether self-knowledge is true, all right? Because there's nobody knows better than you about yourself. So if somebody's going to tell you about yourself, you are in the grand position to be able to figure out whether that's true or not, right? You don't need to know anything else. You don't need to know physics or astronomy or anything like that. No other subject is necessary because you are the world's best person, most knowledgeable person about yourself, right? And really, it's interesting that when you say I, right, you cannot say I about anything that you don't know. So it's the one thing that you know a lot about. So despite you being one object amongst billions of objects, there is no other object in the world that you can refer to as I. Right? You are unique in that sequence. Right? Every other object that is out there is known to you through a means of knowledge. And we started with this last week, if you recall. All right? In order to know an object, you need a means of knowledge. And largely for us, our means of knowledge are based on our five senses: sight, sound, hearing, touch, taste, so forth. All right? And when you come to know an object, there's three things that are being involved here. One is the knower, one is the known, and one is the means of knowing. All right? There's always three things. When you know about anything, you know about something as an object. You objectify it. When you objectify something, then you have the subject, which is you, who is operating a means of knowledge in order to know. All right? So everything in the world we come to know through a means of knowing. Sight, sound, touch, whatever. All right? And the more we come to know about them, the more doubtful we get about them. Because we come to know them through a means of knowing. What if the means of knowing is flawed? Right? So everything you come to believe at an early stage, I mean, if you were Stone Age man, you'd look at the sky and you see that the sun would come up, typically every morning it'll come up around those trees over there, all right? And then it'll traverse the sky in this way and go down over that hill over there, all right? And you give the tree area a name, call it east, and then you call it west, whatever, all right? And you say, that's what happens. The sun gets up and goes down, and thank goodness it comes up again the following day. At night time, you can say the sun goes away, but all of these, there appears to be a ceiling out there, and on the ceiling there's all these little lights that come on during the night time. I mean, it's a lovely, that's what you see, that's what your perception is, all right? It's only later on that you realize, when you're taught something, you come to know, well, actually, the sun's not coming up at all right? We're actually hurtling downwards so that the sun appears to be rising in that direction. And it's in that direction because we're spinning in that way. There is no ceiling, and there's certainly no diamonds twinkling in the sky. You come to know this, all right? Yes, unfortunately. So you come to know this through later pieces of knowledge. So, and you come to know this, and you must therefore always be open to everything that you know about, because it could be false, all right? The sky is not blue, all right? We've known a blue sky ever since we were tiny, but the sky is not blue. You go up there and you realize that the sky is not blue. So things like this are every piece of knowledge that comes to you, an object, knowledge of an object that comes to you, is potentially doubtful, all right? But if I ask you, do you exist? Then you'd probably say yes or probably, all right, depending on how you're feeling. But you can't deny that you exist, all right? Now, how do you know? What is the means of knowledge by which you know that you exist? You're not using any of your senses to know that you exist, right? Knowledge is acquired, I don't know if you know this, but I'll digress. Knowledge is acquired by 6 mechanisms. The principal one is perception through the senses, all right? So that I see something, I hear something directly, I know that that's there, a knowledge of that object comes to me, all right? The second one is by inference. Typical example given, I see smoke on the other side of the lake. I see the smoke, perception, but the inference is there's a fire, all right? I cannot see the fire, but by inference I come to know that there is a fire, because without fire there is no smoke, all right? That's through inference. The third one is through presumption. Wake up in the morning, pavement is wet, lovely sunny day, so the presumption is that it must have rained during the night. I wasn't there, all right? But now I have a piece of knowledge that the pavement is wet, right? And I came through it through presumption, all right? The fourth one is comparison. I come to know something because I'm told it is like something else, all right? A pear is like an apple, but elongated, or whatever. You can come to know something as a result of it being compared to something else that you know, and suddenly you have knowledge about a new thing. The fifth one is very tricky. It's called non-cognition. So we come to know about something because it's not there, right? We come to know that it's not there. So if I said to you, there's a, first of all, my watch is on the table, you can see that, that's perception, all right? If I said, my watch is not on the table, then you say, yes, I can see that the watch is not on the table, all right? You're actually seeing a non-watch. You can see that there's no watch on the table. And so what is happening here is that you are, because seeing is color and form. And clearly, you cannot, I can't say to you, when you're not seeing the watch, I can't say what color is the watch, right? Your eye, or what shape is it? Your eyesight is not seeing the non-watch, but you have now knowledge that something is not there, all right? And that's another way of receiving knowledge. And the final one is with words, where you haven't perceived it yourself, but you're using perception in order to read about something that makes you knowledgeable, about a distant country, or a product, or an instrument, or a car that you had no idea existed prior to you reading the words and the pictures. So these are the 6 ways in which we acquire knowledge. Fundamentally, they're all based on number 1, perception. Because without perception, through our 5 senses, the other 5 ways of knowing don't come to us, right? It's very analytical. It's all written down in the way they just sat there contemplating their navel beside the Ganges, and they just tried to figure out, how is it that we come to know? And they just wrote it down, all right? And so it's brilliant, because the analysis is important, because Vedanta knowledge is all about a progressive, you add little bits to it. And you must be clear about what you already heard in order to understand the next bit that comes along. That's why you say, I don't understand that bit, right? And then we have quite an extensive Q&A, as extensive as you want, Q&A after the hour's talk, so that we can get through some of those queries, some of those doubts. You can think about it at home. You can come back the following week and say, can you please go through that again, because I didn't quite get it. right? I thought I got it in this room. The furthest I got from the door, the foggier it got. That's what normally happens. So every object in the world comes to us as a means of knowing, except apparently knowledge of ourselves. Do we exist? All right. How do we know that we exist? And the answer comes that I just know. Of course I exist. Well, you're not using perception or any of the other mechanisms that you actually heard about. I mean, you can say, well, I can see that I exist. This is me. I can look in the mirror. That's me. I'm using perception to know that it's me. Well, you will analyze that. You could say by inference, definitely. I'm married and therefore I must be alive, right? Good inference, very good inference. I mean, women are very intelligent people. They normally don't marry dead people. So the very fact that somebody married you must mean that you're alive, right? And you exist. Yet you must have existed prior to you getting married. Otherwise, you couldn't have said, I love you, or you couldn't have proposed and they wouldn't have married you. So the inference is gone. The perception is gone too, because you have to say, who is perceiving the body? All right. So it just comes down to the fact that I know that I exist is self-evident. It does not come to me through a means of knowledge. I'm self-existent, I'm self-evident. All right? It just is. There's no other way to describe it. I know that I exist because I know that I exist. I am because I am. Everything else in the world comes to me through a means of knowledge, except myself. All right? Is that clear to everyone? All right. If that is so, then it's quite a useful thing, because we can now separate everything in the world as being me, I, and not I. I is something that is self-evident, I need no means of knowledge, and not I is any other object that comes to me through a means of knowledge. The I in Sanskrit is called Atma, A-T-M-A, and the not I is called Anatma. You add A-N in front of A-T-M-A, Anatma. Okay? So I have Atma, I have Anatma. There's the I, and then everything else in the world is the not I. Okay? Question?
Ahamkara? What is that?
Ahamkara is the ego, the mind. We'll get to that some way down the road. Okay. So, Atma, Anatma. As you know, I'm trying to keep Sanskrit down to an absolute minimum, but it's quite useful. You can translate it merely as I and not I. All right. Now, since we now have these two, whenever you have two things, you have a boundary between the two. So something is I, and at some stage the I turns into not I. So where is the boundary between I and not I, between Atma and Anatma? All right. So a good place to start, a good candidate, would be our skin. All right. Everything this side of the skin is me, it's definitely I. And everything the other side of my skin is not me, not I. It seems a very logical border. All right. You can have somebody really close, you can have a wife, a partner, a child. You definitely are not that. You can have a car, a home. You definitely aren't that. You've got something really close like a wedding ring. You're definitely not a wedding ring. But come this side of the skin, that's me. Right? So you could say this side of the skin, Atma, is me. But I now have a problem with that. All right? Because how do you perceive this body that is this side of the skin? You perceive it with your senses. You can touch it, you can see it. All right? So if you can touch it and see it, then it's an object. Right? It's an object in the world, because, and you come to know of it through a means of knowing. An object in the world is what we called anatma. So how can this body be atma, I, when I've said that it's objects in the world that are known to me through means of knowing is the definition of anatma, right? And I have a problem. If I think that this is atma, everything else is anatma, then this is atma to me, and you are anatma to me. Yet to you, you're atma, and I am anatma, right? Seems to be a little confusing. From my perspective, I appear to be atma. From your perspective, I'm an object in the world. And if I am atma, am I not an object in the world? Well, yeah. You're one of these minuscule little objects of the billions of objects in the world. So how come that I can call this body Atma? The thing is, I come to know this body, all right, through a means of knowledge. Anything that I come through a means of knowledge is an object. I am the subject. I am the knower. And therefore, anything that I come to know cannot be me. Right? I have a special relationship with this body, a very special relationship. And that's why I use the word my. When I have a special relationship with something, I use the word my. This is my body. This is my house, my car, my husband or my wife, my children, right? My phone. I have a special relationship with things, and I call my. But when I use the word my, I imply ownership or association, all right? This is my car or my phone. It's an object. I am the owner. The owner and the owned cannot be the same. You'd never turn around and say, I'm a microwave oven. You'd say, this is my microwave oven, right? The owner and the owned cannot be the same. All right? It's tricky, doesn't it? So the body has to be regarded as an object in the world, and it cannot be me. It's my body. I own the world. I own the body. I operate the body. I handle the body. All right. In the past, I would have said, if this body is white, I'm white. If the body is tall, I am tall. If the body is male, I am a male. But now, if you dissociate, if you find that the body is actually anatma and not atma, then effectively you have to say, I have tallness. All right? I have a body that's white or black or brown. All right? And tallness is an attribute of this particular body. So it's interesting that when we use all these terms of I am, we associate with I am, and we think that therefore that is the real me, because we use the words I am tall, I am short, and we associate in that way. We take it further, we take it in the mind. Right? Well, first of all, before the mind, we take it into our physiology. We say, I'm thirsty. All right? Who's thirsty? You say, I am thirsty. So we've now gone from the body. This is now not a physical thing. This is a physiological thing. This is a life force thing, what in Sanskrit would be known as prana. And in that part of me, there seems to be an I sense. I'm thirsty, all right? I'm hungry. But how is that known to you? Is it known to you? Well, of course it's known to me because I just told you I'm hungry or I'm thirsty or I'm cold, all right? If something is known to you, it is an object. You are the knower. The knower and the known cannot be the same, right? So although you have the I sense in the fact that in prana, within the physiological part of it, the I am hungry no longer relates to, no longer qualifies you. You are not hunger. Hunger or thirst is something that you have. All right? And you go in the mind. You can say, I'm sad. All right? How do you know that you're sad? Do you know that you're sad? Yes, of course I know I'm sad. Do you know when you're happy? Yes, I know when I'm happy. All right? So the sadness and the happiness is an object of knowledge. Who knows? I know. And when happiness and sadness happen, I'm the one who knows it. So I can monitor my mental state. I can say, I'm feeling low today. I'm feeling okay today. All right? I'm the knower of my mental condition. So there's an I sense in the mind as well. There's an I sense in the senses. If you cannot see, you say, I am blind. All right? If you cannot hear, you say, I'm deaf. You associate with the sense, there's an I sense in there as well. It's funny because, if you say something like, I'm fat, you can look at yourself and say, I'm fat. But you're now associating an I sense in two parts of the body. First of all, through perception, you're looking at the body and say, I'm fat. But that's a mental thought. That's happening in the mind. But the thought isn't fat. All right? Now you have two forms of association with I, in the body and the mind. All right? They seem to be two different types of association. So if you have the association of I with the body, the prana, the senses, and the mind, are these all the same I? Or are they separate I's? The thing is, there's only one thing that I can call I. I is not a plural thing. So they're either all part of a collective I, or I is not part of it at all. It's logical. I'm not ruling anything in or ruling anything out. I'm just saying I am either all of them or I'm none of them. But I appear to be I at a number of levels. All right? And this becomes tricky. Now, once you can start to ask a question like this, you can start to have some sort of definitive analysis. You can start going into it. Only when you have a probability of a question can you start to inquire. This discriminative understanding is what the analysis that Vedanta promotes. To say, you are you, all the things that I've said applies to you. It's not rocket science. You haven't had to have any ology in order to understand what I've said, because they relate to you, the individual. All right? So you're in a position to know, and therefore you're in a position to ask, am I all of these things, or am I None of these things. All right. Since the body is known to you, you are the knower, the body is anatma, is not atma. You know that you are hungry, is known to you, you are the knower, prana is not atma. You know that you're sad, or you know that you're happy. Sadness cannot be you. You know that you're blind, or you know that you're deaf. It is known to you, it's an object. Blindness cannot be you. Right. Atma is the eternal subject, and all of these are objects. Right. Now, therefore, I need to really start to inquire, what is Atma? Atma is Atma is consciousness. Why is it consciousness? Because I'm aware of these things. There's awareness, there's a consciousness. Be careful about the use of the word consciousness, especially in the West, because we tend to associate with the verb, I'm conscious of. That's not what this means, right? This means, another word for it would be awareness. So get it very clearly in your mind that when you are aware of things, that is consciousness coming through you, all right? I am a conscious being, right? You say, how do you know? You say, I just know, because I'm aware of everything. I'm a conscious being. Prove it. I don't need to prove it, because it is the only thing I know for certain. It is self-evident. It is self-existent. It is the ground from which all other understanding comes. I'm definitely aware, right? I am that conscious being. Now think about the term conscious being. Here we have an adjective and a noun. All right? Being is the noun, conscious is the adjective. Now, what does English grammar say about adjectives and nouns? Can anybody remember? So the necessity for an adjective is there because the object may be in different forms, may enjoy different forms in its own class. Let's put it another way. I can say a wooden chair when there are likely to be chairs made out of metal or glass or cloth, right? I have to use the word adjective in order to identify that I meant a wooden chair as opposed to another chair, another type of material that chairs can be made from. So when we say conscious being, do you know of any being that is not conscious? No. Right? I mean, it's superfluous. It's like saying cold ice, because I've never known ice to be not cold. Or saying a good saint, because a saint is always supposed to, by definition, a saint is somebody who's good, right? So when we say conscious being, we actually don't need that adjective for the being. In fact, the adjective tells us the nature of the being. So we don't actually need the noun at all. I am consciousness. I know that I'm a being. There's no such thing as an unconscious being. So I am consciousness. What is consciousness? That by which everything else is known. That appears to be my fundamental subject. Right? I am consciousness because I'm aware of everything else that happens. So, Atma is consciousness. So I sit here with my consciousness, right? You sit there with your consciousness. Where does my consciousness stop and your consciousness begin? Right? You have to ask these questions, otherwise you'd never get to the answer. Where do I stop and you begin? Right? If we are consciousness, if we're the awareness in which these things happen, in fact, if you're looking at me, are you seeing consciousness? What are you seeing? An object. You are Atma and you're seeing Anatma here. All right? Not only in physical form, but the words are coming out through mental thought. Right? That's also Anatma. Right? What you're seeing is Anatma in front of me, in front of yourselves. And I'm seeing the same for you. Yet Atma is consciousness. And we know that I exist and I am Atma. That's self-proven, self-existent. So where does your Atma stop and my Atma begin? All right. And the only logical conclusion here is that there is no separation between your Atma and my Atma. That Atma is not within us, but we're within Atma. That there isn't a separate Atma in you and a separate Atma in me, because we can't figure out where that junction is. You're sitting in Atma, I'm sitting in Atma. If Atma is consciousness, is awareness, there is nowhere that awareness is not. Right? If you're aware of anything, it's in your awareness. You see the sun up in the sky. Is it in your awareness or not? Yes, it's in my awareness. Right? You see the mountains on the distance. Is it in your awareness or not? If it wasn't within awareness, you wouldn't be aware of it. All right? So everything that is you're aware of is within consciousness. It has no size and it has no limit. All right? If it has no size and it has no limit, then it has no edge. If it has no edge, it has no time. Because space and time go together. All right? And this is the tricky one. If it has no edge, it cannot change. Because in order to change is a change of state from one state to another. That's what change is. If something is continuous and has no edge, effectively infinity, then it's incapable of change. Because you can never say its state, first state stops here and its second state starts there. Right. Consciousness has no edge. If it has no edge, then there is nowhere that it is not. If it has no edge, there is nowhere it is not. Therefore, I cannot be outside it. I must be inside it. That's why your consciousness and my consciousness is the same consciousness. And this is why in the 60s the hippies used to say, we're all one, man. They just didn't follow the logic completely. All right? And so Vedanta says there is a single unifying consciousness that's called Brahman. And Brahman comes from the root Bra, meaning big, simply big. This is as big as you can get because there's nothing other than it. It is the biggest thing. In fact, it's the only thing that there is. Right? And this consciousness manifests as all of you and me and the objects in the world. This is not easy to follow. And subsequent classes will start to get into this in slightly different ways, different detail, and you'll soon get to know, you'll come to understand this thing from many angles. That's what the Upanishads are. The same underlying truth is being stated in different perspectives because it suits people differently. There are analogies that are used all the time, of course, in order to try and explain what is, after all, a mind-blowing subject. Right? Very easy, ultimately, but a mind-blowing subject. And one of the analogies that are often used is light. All right. Now, you can see my hand. Yes, Ram, I can see your hand. How can you see my hand? Right. Not a trick question. How can you see my hand? Perception, and because the light in this room, right, bounces off the hand and comes to you and you perceive it through your eyes as sight. You see my hand, all right? Can you see my hand now? Yes, right? And can you see the light that was here before that was bouncing off my hand? No. All right. Yet the light is still there, you just can't see it because it hasn't manifested in a manner that is now available through us, through our perception. So it is always there, it's just that it needs to manifest before we can become aware of it. Can you see the electricity running along the wires in the walls here? Can you see the electricity as it comes out as light? Right? It manifests as light. And when it does so, you can see it. And when the bulb filament is broken, does it manifest? No. Is it there? Yes. Yes. You put your finger on it and you'll soon realize that the electricity is there, it's just not manifesting. So what we are is a manifestation of this single underlying reality, right? We are the bright spark, we are the light bulb, we are the filament, all right? And for the duration that this filament is alive, we will shed light. Then the filament will break. The electricity will still be there, all right? And it'll come back again in another light bulb.
It's a good analogy, I haven't heard that before.
Right. But like all analogies, you know, it's not complete, otherwise it'll be the ultimate truth. But analogies, simple analogies, often allow us to remember what these fundamentals are, all right? So something that cannot be seen is separate from the body, but it enlivens the body. It is there after the body has gone. All right? Because it is always there.
The analogies of consciousness, the light is consciousness.
Yes, the light is consciousness. And we can't see it unless it manifests in a form that it can be seen. So, Vedanta starts to say that effectively we as individuals are manifestations of this one consciousness, of this Brahman, right? That is our underlying truth. And this gets to the problem that sometimes people express this one underlying truth, one underlying power, if you like, this Brahman, they express that as God, right? And then they go around and say the expression, I am God, right? Then they're wrapped around in white coats and they're taken away, all right? You can say I'm a manifestation of this one ultimate reality, all right? But so is everything else. So it's best to say I'm also a manifestation of this one underlying reality, all right? You're not the only one. So tree is not God, but God is the tree, all right? The manifestation is not it, it is the manifestation. That's enough for you to think about for a week, I think. Questions?
I was thinking of the boundaries to self in ordinary thinking, modern thinking at least. Our boundaries extend well beyond ourselves, don't they? I mean, personal space,
That's
our
right.
job, our car, our standing in the community or whatever.
Yeah, my. Yes, we put associate with these roles all the time.
And that's what causes suffering, isn't it? Because
Yes,
people
it is.
then fear losing that personal space or boundary, or car, the job.
Yes,
Yeah.
because when they say things like, I'm a teacher, I'm a doctor,
Yeah.
I'm a mother, they're suddenly associating the role that they play to be themselves.
Yeah.
I am,
Yeah.
right?
So
But
if that changes,
yes,
that breaks them, doesn't it?
it breaks them. It's disastrous
Yeah.
when it changes. But if you look at it to say, I'm the actor currently playing the role of a mother,
Yeah.
all right? Because last week I was the actor playing the role of the daughter in front of my mother, all right? And tomorrow morning I'll be the actor playing the role of teacher in front of these people, right? Then you realize that there's an underlying you that play all of these roles, all right? And that the role is something that you have, and anything that you have cannot be you.
And there's been such lovely experiments about our body boundaries, where, you know, they put a cell from a heart in a petri dish and another one from somebody else, and they start beating in synchronicity. And the tests that they've done about how our energies, how far it actually radiates out. So there is no boundary of the skin and...
Yes, indeed. I mean, physiologically, we have these various layers, and the energy layers get weaker and weaker and merge into other people, and some people are much better at picking up these things, you know. Some people can tell a mile away, oh, that person isn't very happy, or whatever. I remember when my wife's a Reiki master, and when she did a lot of meditation, this was in the United States when we lived in California, we couldn't actually walk through a shopping mall without her picking up the emotional states of everybody who was actually passing. And if they bumped into her, it was just, you know, bang, just got this immediate influx of whatever they're suffering from. We can be very good at receiving all of this thing. It is a perception. What is a perception of? It is a perception of an object, right? Who is the perceiver? Me, Atma. Are you the object? No. Right? It is my thought. It is the object that I pick up, and so forth.
If there are no boundaries, then there is no anatma.
Exactly. That's why there is no anatma. Right? There is no object in the world. All there is Atma. So next week we go on to then what is this world of objects that we've been brought up with? If there is no anatma, then how can I explain that this table appears to be solid? Right? and it is an object that's apparently separate from me. Because you have to have an understanding that describes the entire world. Otherwise, because you live in the world, all right? You're manifesting this world, you have a transactional relationship with hundreds of people, you've got to be able to explain it all, otherwise you will simply say, this understanding doesn't work for me.
Doesn't it all depend on time, though? And these things only are here because of how the atoms are configured at this time.
Yes.
So, where does time come from?
Where does time come from?
Not Doctor Who.
No. It's largely an invention.
It's an invention.
Yes. We do it in order to keep sane.
Yeah.
That's right, yes. Yeah, order in the scheme of things. And you slowly get to realize more and more of how all the things that you thought were really important and really cast in stone, cast in steel, is no longer actually valid.
If we are complete and God is you, why don't we have all the knowledge of everything within us?
Well, it wouldn't be fun that way, would it? So the thing is that in order to have total knowledge, you'd have to be that total thing. So if you had total knowledge, then you wouldn't have a body, right? What we consider has this knowledge is the mind, right? Therefore, we tend to think that we are our minds, because the mind contains the intellect, right, ultimately. So there's a knowing mind, there's an emotional mind, there's a recalling mind. The knowing mind leads up to the intellect, right? Remember, the mind normally is there to collect things, collect information through the means of knowing, just put it up there, and then the intellect then sorts it out and says, oh yes, that's speech, and those are the words that's just been said. All right? You do that analysis, and the intellect is there. So the intellect, because it has this power of analysis, right? The intellect gives this notion to us of the ego. Because I come to know, we set up this smaller I within us, this ego that says, I am in charge of the intellect, because I redirect the intellect to where I want it to act. I want it to hear something, see something, understand something, read something. I'm now directing it. That is the true me. Everything that we come to know happens in our mind through our intellect, right? But the intellect is an object. All right. This is the whole problem of Vedanta. You're trying to understand about the subject when the only things that we can ever study are objects. It's like looking at a microscope. You can see everything in there, right? Except the eyes with which you look at things. Now we have to turn. Vedanta is turning that microscope the other way to actually say who's looking. But you can't study it as an object. You can't study it at all, because we can only study things as objects through a means of knowing. That's what makes it tricky, because Vedanta becomes a cognitive shift in thinking. That if I can look at a photograph, there must be a camera present. I can't see the camera, but I'm looking at a photograph, so a camera must be present. Right? And through this analysis, through your own personal knowledge, you can actually come to certain conclusions, come to know who is the subject and what other things are as objects. Any other questions? We're only delving into it sort of, we're dipping our toes in the water on this thing. The Upanishads go through this quite systematically. I just want to give you a broad flavor of the sort of things that we'll be studying, just to see if this is of interest to you, all right, in understanding it. And then we'll just gradually go through some of the, there's many analogies in Vedanta, they're fabulous for it. And there's some beautiful ones, all right? And we'll go through some of them and discuss them one by one. And it gets you to think, and go down, sit in the bath, have a think, and say, oh, that seemed clear when Ram was saying it, but I don't know now. I must write it down and ask him next week, right? That's what I'm here for. We do a review of today's class next week, and then we go into the world.